pages. I know, that was perfect.
Should we spread out now? There's only 5 of us.
We are now being live streamed, so anything you say is recorded.
She just found out today that she's getting deported to Korea. So, sucks.
Is it?
Yeah.
Just the 5 of us.
Please rise. Pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening. Welcome to the July meeting of the Lancaster Zoning Board of Appeals. Just to let you know a little bit about how this works, we will be calling the cases, the requests, in the following order. 705 Pavement Road, 19 Squirrel Run, 5 Stream View Lane, 3620 Walden Avenue and 371 Central Avenue, 4781 Transit Road, and 473 Aurora Street. And I'm sorry, we're not doing Transit Road. Forgot to cross it off. Okay, when your case is called, you'll be asked to come up to the microphone, give us your name and your address for the record, and tell us about your project and the variance that you're requesting. When you're through, the board will go around and ask questions or make comments. And when the board is done, we'll see if there's any questions or comments from others in the audience. If there are, we'll ask the audience member to come up to the microphone and address the board. Also, if you happen to see us on your phones, please understand we're not being disrespectful. Sometimes we use our phones to look up pictures or, what am I trying to say?
Emails.
Aerials and
GIS.
Globe.
GIS.
Pardon?
GIS.
GIS?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
I'm trying to, I'm blanking on what it is, but yeah, aerials. Google Earth. There we go. Okay, so if you see us on our phones, that's all we're doing. Okay, Diane, would you take the roll, please?
Mr. Dorenzo.
Here.
Mr. Michaeli.
Here.
Mr. Castellano.
Here.
Mr. Storr.
Here.
Mr. Sugg. Mr. Tillman. Chairman Marcel.
Here. Thank you. Okay, the first matter is 705 Pavement Road. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for hearing me. I'm here to request a variance for my property to extend the fence that I now have due to an issue.
Name and address for the record, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, 705 Pavement.
And your name?
Sandra Gandy.
Thank you.
So I had wanted to get pictures printed, but I wasn't able, so if I could pass my phone around,
That's
you
fine.
can see where it is and what the problem is. So my neighbor has a huge tree that she'll not clean up. And I'll have my property cleaned up in the fall, and hers will sit all winter through spring, and then it all blows over on my property. So in the past, I've done it myself, but as I get older, I now need knee replacements, and I lost my daughter 3 years ago, and I'm raising her twin boys who are 7. And they play in that area. There's a basketball hoop there, and it's just piled with leaves unless I clean it. So this year I had people come to clean it, and it was $300. And then once it blew back over again, now they want $500 to come back. So I have estimates for fences. I know the variance is 3 feet, and I'd like to put a taller one because otherwise it's just going to blow over. So I can show you the pictures. There's probably about 10 of them. The last one is of the boys. You scroll that way.
It's down there, scroll up.
Thank you.
It would run approximately 10 feet from the road. I had City Fence come out, and they said they can only do 3 feet high. So I contacted the building inspector, and I had Scott Pease come out, and he suggested that I request a variance.
Are you looking to put the fence in the same area where the snow fence is now?
Correct.
No longer.
No, no longer.
We're gonna start with your questions.
So I put up the snow fence to keep the leaves from blowing over, and it's just knocking the snow fence over. And you'll see the one picture where my neighbor is out finally cleaning, and it's May 8th.
Jill?
All of the other neighbors clean up. Do they want to see it?
see it.
Okay.
Anything else you'd like to tell us?
Just hope that you can approve it.
Okay. Before we turn it over to the board, I'd like to ask our town clerk, Diane Terranova, to read the legal notice for this.
First case considered by the Zoning Board of Appeals is that of the petition of Sandra Gandy, 705 Pavement Road, Lancaster, New York, for one variance for the purpose of installing a fence on premises owned by the petitioner at 705 Pavement Road, Lancaster, New York, to wit, a variance from requirements of Chapter 400, zoning section 34, subsection C of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for installing a 6-foot-tall fence in a required front yard. Chapter 400, zoning section 34, subsection C of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires within non-industrial districts no fence or wall other than necessary retaining wall over 3 feet in height shall extend into a front yard of any lot. The petitioner therefore requests a 3-foot height variance.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Catalano, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Have you, thank you, Chair. Sorry, ma'am. Have you spoken to your neighbor at all? Have you addressed your concerns?
This neighbor has lived there for 20 years, and if you saw in the one picture, when the boys were little, she had a Rottweiler that would just run up and down the fence, and that's why, and she had a chain link fence, and that's why I put up a stockade fence, so they didn't get their hand bit off. She's not a friendly neighbor, she's not a kid-friendly neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no
And you
talk.
think putting a 6-foot fence up is gonna A 3-foot fence is not good enough? You don't think that'll hold the leaves from coming over onto your property?
They'll blow right over.
Okay, no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Castellano. Mr. Dorenzo?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
Ma'am, what type of fence are you looking to put up?
The same one that's installed, just an extension of that one. It's a
Okay.
6-foot vinyl.
Okay, 6-foot
White.
vinyl. All right, thank you. No further questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Michaeli?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we do often get petitions for variances for front yard fences, usually when they're on corners. It's rare that we get one for mid-block. In this case, the issue is, in mid-block, it does create a kind of becomes much more visible when you're looking down the street. And I drove around the area, and there were no other front yard fences that I saw. Are you, on top of that, are you sure that that would alleviate your problem? Because leaves come down and they go everywhere.
Well, did you see the fence that's there now and how it's laying up against it? Like, I have nothing there. It's not holding it. And plus, when the boys play there, if their ball goes in her yard, they don't get it back.
Okay. Thank you. I have no more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dorenzo. Mr. Storr?
You said 10 feet. Now, I'm looking at this drawing. Am I seeing something incorrectly?
Yes, the drawing
looks like
looks-
it says 33 feet.
No, 10 feet from the road.
Yeah.
It would be off the road. So City Fence had written up like an estimate to show you, they're saying to do it for 48 feet, but I think I would go 40 feet, like before that bush. If I could approach you and show you on this picture.
Is this your home, correct?
You're welcome to walk up, ma'am.
That's your home, correct?
That's my home.
Okay.
So it's on the
And-
other side.
Yep, right there. You're going to extend that fence farther
Right.
out? Okay.
So see where this is here now?
All the way to that shrub? Okay.
I'll show you on the other.
I saw the pictures. I'm just looking at from the street view.
Okay, so before, yes, right before that shrub.
Okay.
Because the leaves don't go, we have an open field across the street,
Okay, I have no further questions.
and the wind blows from the west, and everything just blows into my driveway.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Storr. Ms. Gandy, my colleagues have asked all the questions that I would like to have answered. I just wanted to express my sympathy for the loss of your daughter. I'm sure
Thank
it's
you.
very difficult, especially
Very.
raising the grandchildren. But I have no questions about the fence issue. Anyone in the audience wish to address the board about this? Okay, there being none, call for, I'm sorry, would anyone like to make a motion? Okay.
Whereas the zoning board of appeals of the town of Lancaster has made the following findings: that no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that no detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting the area variance relief sought, that the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance relief sought, that the requested area variance relief sought is not substantial, that the proposed area variance relief will not have an adverse effect or impact on physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district, that the alleged difficulty is self-created, but not to the extent necessary to preclude the granting of the area variance relief sought, that this board has taken into consideration the benefit of the applicants if the area variance relief sought is granted as weighted against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant, that within the intents and purpose of this ordinance, that variance relief sought, if granted, is the minimum variance necessary to afford relief, that such fence will not unduly shut out light or air to adjoining properties, and that such fence will not create a fire hazard by reason of its construction or location.
Thank you, Mr. Storr. Second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Dorenzo. Roll call vote when you're ready.
Can I point out one thing? Votes are taken for the constituted board. So for the whole meeting, it will be seven vote. And since 2 are not here, in order for anything to pass, there still has to be 4 yeses. It's not the board that is in front of you now. So I just wanted to point that out for the evening.
Thank you, Diane.
Mr. Dorenzo.
Yes.
Mr. Michaeli.
Yes.
Mr. Castellano.
Yes.
Mr. Storr.
Yes.
Chairman Monticelli.
Yes. Okay, Ms. Gandy, your variance request has been approved, so you just need to meet with the building department on how to proceed.
After this.
I'm sorry?
After this.
Yeah.
Like maybe next week or,
Sure.
okay.
The permit application could be ready for tomorrow morning. At any point tomorrow, we'll be able to service the application.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Okay, Diane, would you read the next notice, please?
The second case considered by the Zoning Board of Appeals is that of the petition of Thomas O'Donnell, 19 Squirrel Run, Lancaster, New York, for one variance for the purpose of constructing a shed on premises owned by the petitioner at 19 Squirrel Run, Lancaster, New York. A variance from the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning, Section 14, subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for constructing a shed 24 feet from the right-of-way. Chapter 400 zoning, Section 14, subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires a minimum location of an accessory structure of 35 feet from a front lot line. The petitioner therefore requests an 11-foot variance.
Thank you. Hi, would you introduce yourself, please?
Tom O'Donnell, 19 Squirrel Run.
Thank you. Okay, tell us about your project.
Hi, I'm requesting for a variance for off the road. I'm a corner house on 2 streets. The variance would be inside of an already approved variance. I had a pool. Pool has been removed a few years ago. So the fences are still there. This is 5 more feet inside of that. 2/3 of my house is side and frontage. I don't have much of a backyard, so if I had moved it over to the 35, it'd be almost over to the next side of my house. So that's what I'm looking for. The variance is not on the side of any resident, excuse me, neighbor or anybody else. It's a street.
All right, thank you. Okay, Mr. Dorenzo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions.
Thank you. Mr. Michaeli?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions.
Thank you. Mr. Storr?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions.
Mr. Castellano?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions.
I have no questions either. This is so far pretty easy. Okay. Someone care to make a motion, or shall I?
I'll make it.
Williams?
Okay.
Public?
I'm sorry. Yes, anyone in the audience wish to speak about this matter before we vote? Okay, thank you. There being none now, we'll start with, I'm sorry, Mr. Michaeli.
I'll make the motion. Did I make it yet? I'll make the motion.
Yes, thank you.
Whereas the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Town of Lancaster has made the following findings, that no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that no detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that the benefit sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance relief sought, that the requested area variance relief is not substantial, that the proposed area variance relief will not have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions of the neighborhood or district, that the alleged difficulty is self-created, but not to the extent necessary to preclude the granting of the area variance relief sought, that this board has taken into consideration the benefit of the applicants if the variance relief sought is granted as weighed against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant, that within the intent and purposes of this ordinance, the variance relief sought, if granted, is the minimum variance necessary to afford relief.
Thank you, Mr. Michaeli. I will second it. And can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Dorenzo.
Yes.
Mr. Michaeli.
Yes.
Mr. Castellano.
Yes.
Mr. Storr.
Yes.
Mr. Sugg. Chairman Monticelli.
Yes. You are all set. Your variance has been approved. Just as we told the previous petitioner, contact the building department, and they'll help you proceed from there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Diane, would you read the third notice, please?
The third case considered by the Zoning Board of Appeals is that of the petition of Lawrence Klenk, 5 Streamview Lane, Lancaster, New York, for 2 variances for the purpose of installing a shed on premises owned by the petitioner at 5 Streamview Lane, Lancaster, New York, to wit, A variance from the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning, Section 14, subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for installing a shed 10 feet from the front property line. Chapter 400 zoning, Section 14, subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires a minimum location of an accessory structure of 35 feet from the front lot line. The petitioner therefore requests a 25-foot variance. B, a variance from the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning, Section 14, subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for installing a shed 10 feet from the front property line. Chapter 400 zoning, Section 14, subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires accessory buildings may not protrude into a front yard. The petitioner therefore requests a variance to allow an accessory structure within a required front yard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Looking to put a shed, we live on a corner lot, first off. We live on a corner lot. And essentially, I'd like to put a shed on the property. However, there's no property that's really flat other than the proposed location that I had outlined in the survey. So,
Just state your name for the record.
oh, my apologies. My name's Lawrence Klenk,
And your address, please?
5 Streamview Lane.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Sorry about that. So anyways, we want to put a shed on the property. That way the wife can park. We have a newborn baby. We have a lot of stuff that I try to store. I tried to not even have the expense of the shed or go through the process of doing it by actually using the gazebo and putting the stuff underneath there during the winter. But then I found how expensive that could become when everything started blowing around. And I was out there trying to prevent basically a sale from being created every time there was wind on a corner lot. So anyways, proposing to put a shed, the question is the setback line from where I propose to place it. However, it's the only place that's really feasible for me to put it. If I put it near the pool on the other side of the corner, it's 10 feet from the pool or whatever, and that, that violates that. And then there's sloped ground, so that becomes very hard to do. And that's really the only convenient place to do it. Now, it is surrounded by a privacy fence, which I was grateful for you folks to approve a couple of years ago. So that way it's not visible by a majority of the population, so it won't be an eyesore when people are driving by or whatever. And that's basically about it.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to address the board regarding this variance request? Okay, there being none, Mr. Michael, you want to start?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. Mr. Storr?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Storr. Mr. Castellano?
Yes, Mr. Lawrence, from my understanding, you're a serviceman?
Yes, sir. A veteran.
You're a veteran?
Yes, sir.
I just want to thank you for your service.
Thank you.
I have no other questions, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Castellano. Mr. Dorenzo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also would like to thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir.
No questions, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dorenzo. And again, thank you for your service, and I
Thank you,
have no questions.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. All right, anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thanks, Keith.
Whereas the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Town of Lancaster made the following findings: that no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that no detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance relief sought, that the requested area variance relief sought is not substantial, that the proposed area variance relief sought will not have an adverse effect on the impact or physical and environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district, that the alleged difficulty is self-created but not to the extent necessary to preclude the granting of the area variance relief sought, that this board is taking into consideration the benefit of the applicant if the area variance relief sought is granted as weighted against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant, that within the intent and purpose of this ordinance, the variance relief sought, if granted, is the minimum variance necessary to afford relief.
Thank you, Mr. Storr. Second, Mr. Dorenza, thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Dorenza.
Yes.
Mr. Michaeli.
Yes.
Mr. Castellano.
Yes.
Mr. Storr.
Yes.
Chairman Monticelli.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations, you're very welcome, and you know your next step is the building department.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Have a good night. That's our business as well. But you're right. Okay. You know, Mr. Storr just pointed out the next case is rather, it's going to be in depth. So, Mr. Hopkins, if you don't mind, I'm going to take 473 Aurora Street next. Okay. All right. Just one more before you. Diane, would you read the legal notice for 473 Aurora Street, please?
It'll be the fifth case considered by the Zoning Board of Appeals. It's that of the petition of Mark Dean, Dean Architects, 3284 Walden Avenue, Depew, for one variance for the purpose of interior build-out project for a real estate office on premises owned by Design Works, LLC, at 473 Aurora Street, Lancaster, New York, to wit, a variance from the requirements of Chapter 400, Zoning Section 28, subsection E1A4F of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for providing 9 parking spaces for a proposed real estate office. Chapter 400, Zoning Section 28, subsection E1A4F of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires real estate offices to have the greater of 8 spaces or 1 1/2 spaces per employee, which is 23 spaces for this project. The petitioner therefore requests a 14 parking spaces variance.
Thank you. Good evening. Would you give us your name and address, please?
Good evening. My name is Mark Dean. I am principal at Dean Architects. I am the design professional, but I'm also a part owner of the project.
Okay.
My office is at 3284 Walden Avenue in Depew.
Thank you. Okay. Tell us about this project.
So we constructed the building at 473 a few years ago. We've had a vacant tenant space since the beginning. Envision Realty showed interest in the space, and we have a signed lease for them. We designed their space, we did the construction documents for their space, and we submitted it to town for permitting. And it was reviewed, stating that we needed 23 parking spaces. Our intent all along is reviewing the code under our real estate offices. The code specifically says the number of parking spaces is based on the number of employees, not the maximum number of people that could possibly be in the space. And it says, further goes on to say the minimum, either a minimum of 8 spaces or 1.5 spaces per employee. The code enforcement officer is continued to uphold the need for 23 spaces. We got a letter from the tenant, Envision. The tenant is here with me this evening and would be happy to speak with you as well, stating that this is a letter, again, directly from the tenant. It states that the maximum number of employees within the space would range from 1 to 5 and would typically be 5 people, 3 to 5 people. If you look at the floor plan only has 3 offices. It also has a reception area and an open office area where a fourth and fifth person could be if the 3 offices happen to be full. So what we're asking the board is, also as part of the documentation I gave you, we own the corner of 473. We also own the property at Briarwood Daycare Center. So those properties are combined. And when we go through our parking calculation, which is included in your set, we need a total of 90 spaces, assuming now the 8 for the real estate office, and we have a total of 91 spaces provided. So based on the 8, which we feel is the correct interpretation of the code, we're in excess of the minimum number of spaces. There was an original letter from the tenant that we gave to the town, and that letter said that there was going to be between 5 and 15 people in the space. The tenant misinterpreted what I was asking for and wrote the letter based on the maximum number of people altogether. That would be employees and clientele, as being 5 to 15. We asked them to revise the letter. They did, and that's what we submitted to the building department and what we have submitted to you.
Okay, and the person who wrote the letter, Elizabeth Matthews, is she here?
She's not here, but the representative from Envision is here, if you'd like to speak with him.
Okay. Yeah, can you add anything?
Hello, everyone. How are you?
Good, thanks.
My name is Brennan Macy. I am the Director of Operations for Envision Real Estate. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. I know we did discuss, Mark did mention the letter. It was a clerical error and a misinterpretation on our part. We will not have 15 employees. We have 40 total across the entire company, and we have 4 offices to support that. This office would more or less be a boutique or satellite office for anybody that is within a few miles of Lancaster. We specifically opened it for one agent, more or less in particular. So I don't anticipate that there is any more than, or there will be any more than 3 to 5 employees at max at all times. The original letter was drafted with 3 to 15 or 5 to 15, something of that nature. And that was the interpretation based on the maximum number of people we would anticipate to be in the space, whether it be employees, customers, or all encompassing all at one specific time. But it would never necessitate any more than 5 employees.
We did get the corrected letter. I don't think we ever got the original.
Okay, great.
Sir, can you again give me your first name?
Yeah, Brennan, B-R-E-N-N-A-N, Macy, M-A-C-E-Y.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anything else?
That'll do it.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone in the audience who'd like to address this issue?
Would you like to hear the original quotation from the letter?
Sure.
A couple of comments before you run your decision. Not that this is a problematic issue, we just need to clarify the facts of this entire project. So the last paragraph is simply stating, at any given time, the number of employees in the space would range from 1 to 15, with 3 to 5 occupying the space the majority of the time. Our hope is that there are 1 to 15 employees in this space, and I hope that this business expands to that level of service to that community. We want to be able to provide the proper alliance with the zoning code, with the number of parking spaces and the timing of all the operations that are in place, and not create conflict with the residential occupancies on the second floor. As you may recall, probably half of this board, maybe even less, reviewed the initial project when it was built. Several variances for setback from the roadway, location of dumpsters, and all kinds of things. Parking was a huge discussion because of the size of the building and the potential tenants that were going to be in that building. So I just wanted to understand that parking was always a problem in the building that was too big for the property and the parking lot not able to support the occupancy of the space. So again, it's that clarification and bringing finally the last tenant into building. We want to make sure that we have the zoning code aligned with what the real use is for those facilities. We did experience another variance with the pizzeria, the size of that assembly occupancy. The parking charts, this is probably about the fifth chart that we've seen, and again, just the numbers, we can manipulate numbers all day long, and my hope is that there's not enough parking for these successful businesses in this space, but we don't want to have that create a nuisance to an already busy intersection with a residential subdivision directly next door to the daycare center right next door to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Matt. Okay, no questions from the audience. Someone want to make a motion?
Can we ask questions?
I'm sorry?
Can the board ask questions?
Did we not? I beg your pardon. I'm still in the last case. Mr. Castellano?
I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Madam Chair, thank you.
Mr. Dorenzo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple questions. I noticed on your letterhead, I guess this would be for the Envision folks, you have 4 offices located here. One of them's in Lancaster already. Are you currently in Lancaster?
No, this is the space. Once we hit the sign, we did put it on the letterhead.
Okay. So you were jumping the gun a little bit.
We jumped the gun a little bit.
Okay.
Yep, in anticipation.
Okay.
But, if I may, all of those offices are the same exact style. We never have more than 5 employees at a given time in any of the offices or French Hurdle or George Park location.
Okay. And what are your hours of operation? Because Matt did mention the hours of operation. I think that's a good point to bring up at this point.
9 to 5.
9 to 5, Monday through Friday?
Monday through Friday, 9 to 5.
No weekend?
Yeah.
And it's primarily residential real estate?
Yes, correct. Yeah, we do have a division of commercial real estate, but as of right now, it's 95% residential.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dorenzo. Mr. Michaeli?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My comments, when I first saw this and I saw a real estate office with 15 employees, I know something about real estate offices. I work in a real estate office, and my office has about 25 people who work there, but only 4 are employees. So my first thought was they probably put down agents and brokers. And the truth of it, in my office with 25 people there, there's times when there's only 4 in occupying the office who are there, the 4 employees. I'm curious as to, I mean, I'm doubtful that I think at some point you're probably going to have longer hours than you're looking at now, and you probably will be there for weekends, because I think that's when your business takes place. But either way, I'm really, unless there's times when you have staff meetings or sales meetings, I'm doubtful that there ever, most often, will be 15 people there. Question from Matt. Matt, what if this was a insurance office or an accountant's office? What would the code then require? Because this is a 1,438 square foot space.
Right, and again, we would apply whatever the zoning requirements for parking, number of parking spaces to that specific occupancy.
Okay. Do we have in our code, is there one for general office, professional office, that's not broken down for the specific use?
And as I said, when we review these tenant spaces for possible tenancies, this could easily be another coffee shop, another restaurant, assembly occupancy. And again, that's where the parking requirements laid out in the code basically need to line up with what's provided. If you'll allow me a moment to give you what exactly that's going to be for business occupancy, since I can't seem to memorize that thing.
175 per square foot, which would be 8. So if this were a business, to answer your question more directly, we would have the minimum required parking spaces.
So I didn't know what it was, but I was guessing maybe it was 5 per thousand, which would have been 7. So if this was an insurance office or some other business, it would have probably required 8 spaces.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. Michaeli. Mr. Storr?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Other board members pretty much asked what I wanted to ask. I do have a question for Matt, though. If we grant this variance and then in the future they leave and another tenant moves in, does that variance apply to the next tenant as well?
It would.
Only if it were a real estate office.
If it was general business or accounting or something else, that variance would stay?
In occupancy, we would review the entirety of the parcel.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Storr. Mr. Jean, Were you the original partial owner of that
Yes.
plaza? And what year was that born? What year was that built?
14? What year did we build that? 17? 17?
Okay, thank you. And that particular space that the real estate agency wants to occupy, that's been vacant?
Yes.
Since 2017?
That's correct.
Okay, all right. And I'm looking at Ms. Matthews' letter. She did say that there will be hours of operation Saturday and Sunday that vary, but they wouldn't be any longer or any different from 9 to 5 if there were anybody there. And as Mr. Michael said, I can see you having to expand the hours into the evenings if business is that good. I know a lot of people look at houses after work, and if they wanted to meet with the agent, I assume they'd be meeting at the office?
They meet at the house, almost exclusively. I'm hard-pressed to recall any time that we've brought, in the last 6 months at least, or post-COVID, with all of the mandates and everything post-COVID, we haven't brought anybody almost at all into the office that I can recall. Hours of operation anytime on Saturday and Sunday are almost exclusively for the contractors to enter the property and maybe print the flyer. But it's very quick, and nobody tends to occupy the office. And none of our employees, none of our 9 to 5 salaried or hourly employees occupy the space on Saturday and Sunday at all.
Okay.
Oh, that's a good distinction, because when you said contractors, real estate, most, and that's what John was talking about, most of the real estate professionals are 1099s, right?
All but 5. We have 5 hourly or salaried employees. The balance are all 1099.
Throughout the company, throughout the offices, you have 5. Is that what you're saying? Or 5 here in Lancaster?
5 out of the entire company, or?
The entire company. We have 5 actual employees that are contracted or that are salaried and hourly.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me. I would just comment that depending on, if we didn't grant the variance, depending on the next tenant, the parking requirement could be much higher. It sounds like a real estate agency is going to have a lower number of required parking spaces. Okay, anyone in the audience who'd like to speak about this project? Okay, there being none, anyone want to make a motion?
I will.
Thank you.
Whereas the Zoning Board of Appeals for the Town of Lancaster has made the following findings: that no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that no detriment to nearby properties will be created by granting of the area variance relief sought, that the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicants to pursue other than the area variance relief sought, that the requested area variance relief sought is not substantial, that the proposed area variance relief will not have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental condition in the neighborhood or district, that the alleged difficulty is not self-created, but not to the extent necessary to preclude the granting of the area variance relief sought, that this board has taken into consideration the benefit to the applicants if the variance relief sought is granted, as weighed against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant, that within the intent and purposes of this ordinance, the variance relief sought, if granted, is the minimum variance necessary to afford relief.
Thank you, Mr. Dorenzo. Second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Castellano. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Dorenzo.
Yes.
Mr. Michael.
Yes.
Mr. Castellano.
Yes.
Mr. Storr.
Yes.
Chairman Monacelli.
Yes. Congratulations, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Good luck
Thank
with
you
the
very much.
project.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And now, start your engines.
Diane, when you're ready, would you read the legal notice of this next case, please?
The sixth case considered by the Zoning Board of Appeals is that of petition of Timothy Boyle, Noco Express Properties, LLC, 2101 St. Rita's Lane, Williamsville, New York, for 6 variances for the purpose of constructing a car wash facility on premises owned by the petitioner at 3620 Walden Avenue and 371 Central Avenue, Lancaster, New York, to wit: A, a variance from the requirements of Chapter 400, Zoning Section 18, Subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for a proposed lot size of .94 acres. Chapter 400, Zoning Section 18, Subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires a minimum lot area of 1 acre. Petitioner therefore requests a .06 acre or 2,613.6 square feet variance. B, a variance from the requirements of Chapter 400, Zoning Section 18, Subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for a 10-foot side yard setback abutting a residential district. Chapter 400, Zoning Section 18, Subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires a minimum side and rear yard for structures abutting a residential district of 50 feet. The petitioner therefore requests a 40-foot variance. C, a variance from the requirements of Chapter 400, Zoning Section 18, Subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for a 10-foot side yard setback abutting a non-residential district. Chapter 400, Zoning Section 18, Subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires a minimum side and rear yard for structure abutting a non-residential district of 25 feet. The petitioner therefore requests a 15-foot variance. D, a variance from the requirements of Chapter 400, Zoning Section 18, Subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for a parking area with 10-foot 6-inch setback from the west lot line right-of-way of a dedicated street. Chapter 400, Zoning Section 18, Subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires a minimum yard for parking, loading, and stacking areas from the right-of-way of a dedicated street of 20 feet. The petitioner therefore requests a 9-foot 6-inch variance. E, a variance from the requirements of Chapter 400, Zoning Section 18, Subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for a parking area with a 10-foot setback from the south lot line right-of-way of a dedicated street. Chapter 400, Zoning Section 18, Subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires a minimum yard for parking, loading, and stacking areas from the right-of-way of a dedicated street of 20 feet. The petitioner therefore requests a 10-foot variance. F, a variance from the requirements of Chapter 400, Zoning Section 18, Subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for a parking area with a 13-foot 6-inch side yard setback abutting a residential district. Chapter 400, Zoning Section 18, Subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires a minimum side and rear yard for parking, loading, and stacking areas abutting a residential district of 25 feet. The petitioner therefore requests an 11-foot 6-inch variance.
Thank you. Welcome back, Mr. Hopkins.
Yes.
Mr. Doyle, how are you?
Yes, good evening. Good evening, Sean Hopkins of the law firm of Hopkins, Storge, and McCarthy on behalf of the applicant. Also with me is Tim Boyle. As this board will recall, we've presented this...
Your address, please.
5500 Main Street, Suite 343, Williamsville, New York, 14221. And Tim, why don't you give your address so they have it?
2101 St. Rita's Lane, Williamsville, 14221.
So as the board will recall, we've presented this project during 2 previous public hearings held on January 13th and April 14th. This is actually a continuation of those public hearings, so I would like to incorporate all of that previous discussion and the extensive documentation that's been submitted. Since that time, there have been several updates, and I'm going to highlight on what those are. Number 1, the Planning Board, during its meeting on May 4th, did recommend the issuance of what's known as a negative declaration pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act. Subsequently, on June 6th, by a unanimous vote, the Town Board went ahead and issued a negative declaration. It's important to note that was after a coordinated environmental review, an exhaustive coordinated environmental review, and basically represents the Town Board's determination as the designated lead agency that the project will not result in any potentially significant adverse environmental impacts. Until that occurred, this board did not have jurisdiction to issue a decision. And then finally, most recently, on July 5th, I did submit a letter to the Zoning Board of Appeals with an updated version of the landscaping plan. The updated version of the landscaping plan is pretty simple in terms of the change. As you may recall, Matt and Marie Russo are the homeowners of the home on the other side of the 50-foot Brentwood Avenue right-of-way. They asked that the 11 evergreen trees we previously had on their property line, at their request, pursuant to a meeting Tim and I attended with Matt and Marie on February 15th, they asked that we move that to the northern portion of the site. We actually agreed. We think that's a better change. It'll provide better screening than if it's on the opposite side of the right-of-way. That also ensures that we'll be responsible for the long-time maintenance of that landscaping. So that's really what's been updated since we were last here. With that being said, I do want to also note that I did give you a handout. The handout consists of 3 things, all important. Number 1 is a copy of that negative declaration issued by the town board on June 6th. Second is a copy of a letter you previously received from Tim Boyle to Harold Rain, the owner of the property adjacent at 3630 Walton Avenue, which is here. And that sets forth conditions that we've agreed to in connection with the redevelopment project based on extensive discussions as well as a meeting. And then finally, we did present this during your April meeting. This is a plan that shows the limited availability for a redevelopment project on this site in the absence of area variances. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a second. It is important to note that this site is properly zoned pursuant to the zoning code. It's zoned GC. The intent and purpose of that code is to provide areas within the town for location of commercial uses that serve community-wide needs for general and specialized goods and services, comparison shopping, and transportation-oriented uses. Such uses may require larger land areas and generate larger volumes of traffic and evening activity. The site is properly zoned for the use. The site itself is approximately 0.94 acres in size. It is important to note one of the variances is the minimum requirement pursuant to the current code is 1 acre. I think we're all familiar with the history of this site. It was utilized as a gas station for many decades. After NOCO purchased it, they cleaned it up and remediated the property in accordance with the New York DEC Brownfield Program standards. Subsequently, it was used as a commissary for the back end of the NOCO Express convenience stores, and it's been vacant for more or less 3 years. During that time, Tim has had numerous inquiries from prospective tenants to simply reutilize that existing building. I think we all know where it is. Unfortunately, none of those uses have been particularly attractive. Tattoo shops, smoke shops, used car dealers, et cetera, et cetera. And it's kind of not surprising given the condition of that building that's many decades old and the existing site conditions. It is important to note that when you look at the layout reflects input we received both from the New York State Department of Transportation and the Erie County Department of Public Works. DOT has jurisdiction on Walden Avenue. There's currently 2 curb cuts on the site onto Walden Avenue. The original plan that we presented, submitted, showed only 1 driveway. DOT, after reviewing it over the course of many months, including a traffic study, confirmed that we would need to remove those 2 driveways and have absolutely no access onto Walden Avenue. And then secondly, we are showing 1 curb cut onto the Erie County Highway, which is Central Avenue. That traffic study in the plan has also been reviewed by the Erie County Department of Public Works, specifically their traffic engineer, Gina Wilkolowski, and basically they've asked for us to do one thing, and that was to make sure that we extended the turn lane, which is depicted here, left turn on the Central. We are extending that 192 feet. And the reality is that's based on existing conditions. It's not based on our site. Tim, I believe, gets some credit because he volunteered to do that based on input from Erie County. So the driveway onto Central Avenue, which is the county highway, is the only location that we can get approved. And all of that documentation has previously been submitted. It's also important to note that if you grant the requested relief, unlike some of the other projects that you reviewed this evening, we simply can't call Matt tomorrow and ask for a building permit. We need 2 additional approvals. We need a special use permit from the town board, and we also need site plan approval from the town board. That, of course, will require a review and a recommendation from the planning board. So I acknowledge, while this is a prerequisite for the successful redevelopment of the site. It's far from the end of the process. What I want to talk about is what we've changed and why. Very briefly, again, we presented this during the April meeting, and it's summarized in that letter that Tim Boyle submitted to Harold Rain, dated March 8th or March 9th, a copy of which you've had. So number one, we've added that acoustic block sound paneling for a distance of 54 feet. It's located here in pink. That's specifically where vehicles will enter the standalone car wash. And as we've talked about previously, this is not a Delta Sonic. This is literally a standalone car wash. It's largely subscription-based. And I think over time we're seeing more and more of these of West New York. I think everyone's understanding they don't generate the kind of traffic or the intensity of use of a new Delta Sonic. So we've agreed to do that. Just by way of comparison, that results in a decibel reduction of 19 to 22 decibels. We previously did provide you with the technical specifications. Number two, we're showing a 6-foot fence running along that entire property line with 3630 and 21 Remwood. As we get closer out to Walden Avenue, per the zoning code, obviously we have to retain clear vision. The Russos, who live on the opposite side of the Remwood Avenue right-of-way, separated by 50 feet, asked us to provide an 8-foot fence. So we've added an 8-foot fence there. That's highlighted in pink. As the chairperson knows, we actually conducted a site visit at the existing location of Class C Chassis at 6164 Main Street. That's at the northeast intersection of Main Street and Youngs Road on a cold winter day in late January. And one of the comments that came up from the adjoining property owner was, we witnessed vehicles being sprayed manually as they enter the car wash, and it did generate some noise compared to what else could be there. Thankfully, a change has been made in technology, and that change is that area now begins not at the edge of the opening, but 50 feet within, and is completely automated. There's no longer employees out there spraying cars as part of the pre-wash process. And Tim is committed to that in his letter. And then finally, the existing ranch home next door that's zoned and utilized for commercial purposes, specifically an accounting office. We've agreed that we'll replace all of the windows in that building. Those windows are original, and Tim and I, how we've gotten to know Harold Rain Jr., we know he works a lot, including the summer, including the weekends, so we've agreed to accommodate that as well. So all of those changes reflect what we've done as part of a very concerted effort to address input from the two adjoining property owners. And while they may not be here this evening, we do want to express appreciation. They've been very willing to talk to us. We've met with them again and again. And obviously, we also want to express appreciation to the ZBA chairperson for meeting us with the Rains in late January. So now let's get on with what we're asking for. And you've seen this before, but we're going to walk through it real quick. What are the variances? There is one other point I want to make. Tim and I went through a similar process in connection with the redevelopment of the property at 6164 Main Street. Again, the existing Class C Chassis car wash. That was their first standalone car wash in West New York. And believe it or not, we went through the exact same process. We needed relief from the Zoning Board of Appeals. That one actually required a rezoning. And on March 21st of this year, I did submit a letter to the Zoning Board of Appeals with copies of letters from 3 of the adjoining property owners, basically stating that we've honored the commitments we've made and that we've been good neighbors. And from time to time, a minor issue has popped up since that location has been open, and Tim, working closely with Class C Chassis, has taken care of those. So in terms of the variances, variance number 1 pertains to lot size. The zoning code requires minimum lot size of 1 acre. The lot as it sits today is 0.94 acres. There's nothing we can do about that. It's non-conforming. It's only off by 6/100ths of an acre. Area variance number 2 pertains to the side yard setback from the adjoining property to the east. That portion of it that's zoned residential. The back is residential. The front is commercial. The zoning code would require a 50-foot setback here to the building, and what we're showing is 10 feet. Area variance number 3 pertains to the side yard setback for a non-residential district. 25 feet required, and we're showing approximately 13 or 14 feet. That's here. So those variances are both for the building setback. The reason 2 separate variances are required is because the back parcel is zoned residential, the front parcel is zoned commercial. And keep in mind, we originally had the car wash building located here, up closer to the Central Avenue frontage. Unfortunately, as a result of the input received specifically from DOT, that was no longer feasible because they would not allow us any access onto that state highway.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Could we see that?
Oh, yeah. Is it okay?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, and I didn't know there's other residents here. Come on.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I would have directed it more towards you if I had known. Can you see from there? Yeah, can I? Is that okay to the board? I think the board has seen this again and again. So. Okay, area variance number 4 pertains to the setback of the parking areas and access aisles along Central Avenue. We're showing 10.5 feet versus the 20 feet required. Area variance number 5 is very similar. On Walden Avenue, we're showing 10 feet versus 20 feet required. Area variance number 6 pertains to the 25-foot side yard setback for parking, loading, and stacking from a residential district, and we're showing 13.5 feet. And that's for that portion of the access aisle as you exit the car wash. As you recall, we previously were asking for a 7th variance. That was for the number of stacking spaces. We eliminated that variance, and now we have 3 extra stacking spaces compared to the requirements of the zoning code. So obviously, this request, as is the case in any request for area variances, is governed by the balancing test and the 5 criteria set forth in New York State Town Law, Section 267B3B. This board knows it very well. You recite it in connection with any decision. On the one hand, the benefits that we think will be received by the applicant are quite clear. It's impossible to redevelop this site without relief. That's just simply the case, given the nature of the parcel and the size of the parcel. Number 2, the layout reflects the input specifically received or required from both the New York State Department of Transportation and the Erie County Department of Public Works. And while there's no doubting the fact that it will generate traffic, in terms of access onto the adjacent roadways, clearly much better than what's there today. We have 4 curb cuts, 2 on Walden, 2 on Central Avenue. If we simply reutilize that building, those curb cuts could stay. Instead, we're replacing it with a curb cut that's for a driveway onto the Central Avenue that's 250 feet from the intersection, and we're also voluntarily extending that turn lane onto Central Avenue based on existing conditions. In terms of detriments, given what we've done, given the modifications that we've made, given what else could go there, we think there are no detriments. We again express appreciation to the 2 contiguous property owners. We've worked very closely with them over the course of not just the 6 months this has been in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals, but going back with the reins a couple years. So it's been a long process, and we do appreciate the ZBA providing us with the opportunity to work with them. In terms of the 5...
I'm sorry, could I just interrupt you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I missed what you said about, excuse me, 250 feet in a driveway?
Yeah, so we only have 1 driveway onto Central Avenue, right? There's 2 driveways today on the Walden. Those are gone.
Excuse me.
There's 2 driveways onto Central. We're only going to have 1, and we've located it as far away as possible from the intersection. And then also Erie County asked us to extend that left turn lane on Walden by 192 feet. We're going to do that. We're going to restripe that and do it pursuant to a permit to be issued by the Erie County Department of Public Works.
Okay, all right, yeah, I thought there was something else.
Yeah, so we made all those changes, and again, that goes back over a year review process, especially with DOT. So the first criteria that you need to consider in connection with the requested relief, whether or not the granting of the requested area variances will result in an undesirable change to the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties. We think the answer is no. Obviously, we remind you of the existing site conditions. We have a vacant building there today, does not comply with setbacks. We have parking there today, does not comply with setbacks. The site is largely devoid of landscaping. And what we're doing is we're proposing to improve it with a new plan that will include not only the building and the other amenities, but extensive landscaping. As you recall, subsequent to your hearing held in early January, we added 73 additional trees and bushes. along Walden Avenue and Central. So with respect to those two variances for vehicle use setback along both Walden and Central, we think we've really mitigated against any adverse impacts by providing that extensive landscaping. So we think that criteria weighs in favor of the applicant. Criteria number 2 is whether there's any alternative that would allow us to avoid the relief we're requesting from this board that would be feasible in allowing us to receive the benefits we're seeking. And that's where I would ask you quickly take a look at this plan, that colored plan prepared by Anthony Pandolfi at Carmina Ward Morris. And what he's showing here in blue is the required setback for building area. And then what he's showing in red there is where we could locate a building and parking. And if you look at the shape of that, to envision any use where the building, a new building, parking would be located, access aisles would all be located in that little red area, I can't come up with a use, maybe a popcorn stand, but there's really nothing you could do there in the absence of the requested relief. So we think that criteria clearly weighs in our favor. Criteria number 3 is whether the requested relief is substantial. And within Exhibit C of the application, I set forth the case law on that point. And the point with respect to criteria 3 is whether or not the granting of the requested relief will result in any harm. In this instance, we do not believe it will, for the reasons I've previously elaborated. Criteria number 4 is whether the granting the requested relief will result in adverse physical or environmental condition impacts on the conditions. Again, existing conditions today compared to what we're proposing. The town board did conclude its coordinated environmental review on June 6th via the issuance of a negative declaration. And then the next point in the process is where we're going to have to demonstrate clearly that we satisfy each and every technical requirement in terms of lighting, landscaping, stormwater management, sanitary sewer capacity, water capacity, and rest assured, Matt, working with the planning board and the town board, will hold us to that standard. And we're comfortable with that. We have an excellent engineering firm involved. Then the final criteria is whether or not the alleged hardship is self-created. And as you know, the law specifies that cannot be the sole basis for your decision making. Almost always when I come in front of a zoning board of appeals, including last night, when Tim and I were in the town of York, I acknowledge it's a self-created hardship. Here I would ask you to consider that maybe it's not, because of the fact that the layout of this project is driven by other agencies, specifically the New York State Department of Transportation and the Erie County Department of Public Works. With that being said, if you find that it is a self-created hardship, we think it's quite clear the overall balancing test and 4 of the 5 applicable criteria provide strong justification for the granting of the requested relief. So what we would ask you to consider is granting the requested area variances. We do appreciate the time and effort that's been spent by the Zoning Board of Appeals in reviewing this application. And then finally, of course, Tim and I would welcome any additional questions that any of you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. Mr. Castellani, you want to get started? I'm sorry.
I appreciate all the detail you guys are putting in time into this. Have you guys considered any more relief as in the area of traffic that runs through there? It is the busiest section in Lancaster. You can cut around it all you want. It's a nightmare. Residents hate that corner. I can't find one. I can't find a handful of people that are in support of such a large project. Has there been anything discussed about, besides your exit here, how you can mitigate any type of traffic jam because it's bad there?
Well, we've done what we were asked to do. Number 1, we provided that turn lane to mitigate against existing conditions. Number 2, we are only showing a single driveway connection onto Central Avenue. We're eliminating 3 of the 4 curb cuts. Just so you know, we acknowledge that that's a busy intersection, and I want to acknowledge the neighbors as well. But if you think in terms of that site being redeveloped, number 1, the subscription-based car washes don't typically generate a lot of traffic at the time that's a concern. The weekday AM peak hour, in the weekday PM peak hour, and also when his school is out. Their busiest times are Saturdays. We were talking about real estate offices earlier. That's the same case here. And I also would ask you to consider the fact that that issue has been addressed in connection with the town board issuing a negative declaration pursuant to seeker. So I understand it's a concern. I just simply think, and not to be in any way disrespectful, it's not a concern with respect to the variances. I would note that we did retain the services of SRF Associates, probably the most reputable traffic engineering firm in Western New York. They did prepare a traffic impact study, which was subsequently updated twice, and that resulted in us getting the go-ahead from both DOT and Erie County. So while we're open as we move forward to any other ideas, I think we've done everything we can.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
No question. No more questions.
Thank you, Mr. Castellano. Mr. Dorenzo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this point, no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dorenzo. Mr. Michaeli?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A few comments. I'd say you've been coming, this project first appeared to us when, was it January?
January.
So of all the years I've been on this board, I've spent more time thinking about this project than any other project. I hope that at least I ever have before. And it's a difficult one. Of your, I would say this, well, of your variances, the only one to me that's really impactful is number 3, I think it is, which is the side setback.
Of the building.
Yeah, to me, I mean, frankly, the other ones to me are less impactful. And if it was just the other ones, I probably would care a lot less. To me, that's the one that's most impactful.
Right. Can I just clarify, John? I think what you're saying is the one that you're most concerned at is the building setback from the adjacent property. Unwalled. Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah. I know that the setback requirement going further north is actually greater, but truthfully, there's never going to be a residential house on that property, so it's probably not going to have much of an impact.
Right.
So the only concern here is that. I know you've tried a lot to mitigate that the best you can.
Right.
One question.
One between Harold's property. I just want to clarify which one you were speaking.
Yeah. I'm sorry if you said this right, but where do you stand with the planning board? I know you had the neg deck, but did the planning board approve the site plan yet?
No, so the planning board hasn't approved the site plan, keep in mind, because they can't do so until you've granted the requested relief. And ultimately, the planning board doesn't approve it, the planning board recommends the town board. So the town boards will need to approve two things, special use permit and the site plan.
And the negative declaration went both to the planning board and
it did. The planning board, the planning board recommended the issuance of a negative declaration, and then the town board on June 6th issued a negative declaration by unanimous vote.
Okay. I've looked at this a lot of different angles, and I've spent time going over to the one at Main and Young's and listened to the noise. And yeah, there's noise. I've went further back to see how much more the noise is or how much less it is, and it's there's definitely noise. So for now, I have no further questions.
I do want to note, John, one thing that I forgot to say. Number one, what issue came up in January was, what impact can noise have? Subsequent to that meeting, Tim and I looked at the noise ordinance, and I'm sure Matt knows what it says. What it does say is, with respect to any new use, the maximum increase in decibel levels is 5. We've acknowledged that. We've actually acknowledged that to the 2 adjoining property owners. And rest assured, that means if we have an issue, we're going to have to address it. Number 2, I get your concern. The concern is the proximity of this building to the adjoining property owner. But if you look at this site, we really don't have any other options. I think the biggest change we've made, based on the discussions, are providing that sound paneling for a distance of 50+ feet. Again, results in a decibel reduction of 20 decibels. I think that's a big reduction. And then number 2, the biggest difference compared to the Class C chassis location at 61 and 64, I think by moving that vehicle prep area 50 feet inside the building and fully automating it, the noise levels will definitely be less than they are at that location. I also want to note, when we met with the ZBA chairperson and residents on site in late January, we were also told that the dryers, those have settings, so if need be, they can be adjusted. And I think at that particular site, they have adjusted them.
Right, in order to comply with the noise ordinance. And if I might just state that the location of our building and the proximity to our neighbor's property at 3630 is no closer than the existing gas station is to his property now and when he bought it. And also, based on our measurement of sound at the entrance to the car wash, it's about 7 decibels lower than the ambient background noise of Walden Avenue right now. So before we install the sound panel, before we replace this window, the level of noise at the entrance of that car wash is lower than it is at Walden Avenue.
And I think you'd be hard pressed to find another company in West New York, and again, we've been doing business for decades, that would voluntarily replace windows, put the sound, I mean, we've incorporated all that based on the discussions, not only with this board, but with the adjoining property owners.
It's a $25,000 sound barrier, and we're replacing his windows. And we're making the guarantee that no matter what, we have to abide by the noise ordinance.
And we've also made that same guarantee to the Russos. I want to note that they're not here, but we want to acknowledge that we've assured them.
And I stand here on, the Newman family reputation, because I've had to make this representation many times, including when we built our truck stop at Walden and Central. Noise pollution, light pollution, traffic congestion, I've always made the same representation. If there is a problem, we will take care of it in the future, period. And the property will be owned by the Newman family, and they stand behind their commitments.
Nobody on the board is questioning your integrity or your...
No, we know.
Your ability to try to work through all the problems that are here.
Thank you.
The question that the board overwhelmingly is asking is, does this property fit on that particular parcel? And I think that's what's in front of us.
Right.
Right.
Right, but again, if you look at this map, if not this, what? There's nothing. There just isn't. I mean, and remember, a lot of these setbacks are pursuant to the relatively new zoning code that came out of the moratorium. So most municipalities wouldn't require the 20-foot setback on both streets in terms of paving. It's fine, it's in your code, but I can't envision there's any redevelopment of this site in the absence of variances.
And that's a 4,000 square foot building, and currently we have about almost 6,000 square feet of building on that location. And based on this map, it really does render this parcel almost unusable without some level of relief.
Certainly understand.
You understand
Yeah.
that?
I have more questions, thank you.
And I also want to know, we didn't think you were questioning our credibility. And we just want to make sure.
Absolutely not.
Not at all.
But we've been doing business in the town for an awful long time, and my point was nothing other than, one, I greatly appreciate how much time and how many phone calls you've taken from us, and the fact that you visited the site in January. You've certainly gone above and beyond to entertain our project, and I greatly appreciate that.
You said, okay, thank you, Mr. Michaely, and Mr. Storr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Were they provided the letter that we received on July 13th?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. My question is, I'm not going to read it then, if you have a chance to read it. Do you have any response to the letter that we received from Mr.
Wait, July 13th?
Yes, I emailed it to you.
Which one?
Just yesterday.
I'll read it for the record anyway. Dear sir, madam, please see the following attached. The original letter dated 1/12/22, follow-up letter dated 4/12/22, and email correspondence with Tim Boyle regarding the purchase of our property, which you provided that same correspondence.
The March 9th letter, yeah.
Those are all the same. But this is the letter from Mr. Ream. In our opinion, by allowing the variances to be approved, we expect our property to incur financial harm similar to the homeowner whose home is now a parking lot next to the Tim Hortons at Walden and Central Avenue. In making your decision, we ask that you consider whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or detriment to nearby properties will be covered by the granting of the variance. Again, it is in our opinion that given the car wash is just 30 feet from the back of our building and 10 feet from our property line, it is just too close, causing the above criteria not to be met. Would you buy a building so close to a car wash? I ask that the board take this into consideration and not approve the variance so close to our building. So my question is, Mr. Boyle, and do you have, what's your initial response to that?
Well, our response is, and keep in mind, this is a somewhat strange family situation. So the record owner of the property is Harold Rain. He's a 90-year-old gentleman. The person that I've been dealing with and that Tim's been dealing with, who we met with in January, was his son and his daughter-in-law, Harold Rain Jr., and her, and that's where we reached that agreement in terms of the conditions. I would also note, in terms of Harold, let me finish. I would also note in terms of Harold Rain Sr., Tim has been in discussions with him for the past decade about the possibility of purchasing their property. There have been some ongoing discussions as recent as today, but we're not in a position today that we can commit to purchasing their property because, again, we're 2 years down the path.
And his answer for 10 years consistently has been he had no interest and he would not sell the property until the day after you received that letter, which was back in July, the day before our last hearing. And he,
No, the April.
April, excuse me. And his request was that we buy the property for $500,000.
Okay.
That just isn't, he's got 50 feet of road frontage. And then it just puts us in the same position where then we are going to have to, one, get the back property rezoned from residential to commercial. We're going to have to then we're going to be up against the next residential home that we'll have the same issues with. Right, of course, yes.
Yeah, so it's a
And so what I've said is this, I've offered him $300,000 for the property, subject to us being, I said, I cannot at this late stage purchase the property without contingencies to incorporate his property into a future design. So we have been unable to reach an agreement. I think it's $150,000 to $175,000 piece of property. To be consistent, I think we've gone above and beyond for a long time to try to acquire some of the property or all of the property. I think there's been some unreasonable requests. We've tried, and at this late stage, 2 years into this, I believe we're going above and beyond to accommodate the son who was the long-term occupant of
And who runs the business?
So this letter was sent by a Renate Ream.
Renate?
R-E-N-A-T-E.
That must be Harold Sr.'s wife, who I understand now.
That is.
Who I understand now has power of attorney because Harold Sr. is experiencing cognitive difficulties.
Wouldn't that make her the homeowner then?
Not yet, no. She has power of attorney.
Okay.
So we're told. And
So we're told.
And I did request in that correspondence to see that so that because I've gotten some it's a very sensitive situation, and Harold Jr. and I have had extensive conversations about taking his father's phone call, being polite and respectful to him, even though he's really not in the position, it's virtually impossible to communicate with him, but he asked me to please always take his phone calls, take him seriously, and be respectful to him, and I always have. So I've gotten some good information and some bad information.
I appreciate it.
And regardless, again, that's, I think, the most recent letter is from the wife, who allegedly has power of attorney, and yes, indeed may. Regardless of that letter expressing opposition, we're honoring the commitments we've made to the family, meaning we're not saying, well, because of that, guess what, you don't get windows, guess what, that you don't get sound paneling, guess what, you don't get landscaping, guess what, you don't get fence. We're honoring our commitments.
And I couldn't disagree more that a new $4 million low-volume car wash next to their existing building would have a detrimental impact on the value versus what is there today.
That was one of my 3 questions. My second one was regarding to the turning lane that you're adding. My understanding of it is, as we spoke in January, it's just paint on road. You're not widening Central Avenue.
Well, to be confirmed, there may need to be, we have to look at that. We're hoping that it's not, but whatever it is, we have to do it. We're thinking we can do it via striping, but all that has to be verified via a survey. Meaning we literally have to get a surveyor to go out there and survey Central Avenue, and if lo and behold, we can't do it by just restriping.
My understanding, or I live right around the corner.
Sure.
If you extend that turning lane very much, it narrows pretty quickly to a 2-lane road.
Right.
I don't understand. The math isn't working in my head of how a turning lane can just be painted onto that road without it expanding. And then that would now affect the house next to the NOCO, which I believe you also own.
No, it would only be on our side. It wouldn't be on our side.
Okay.
It wouldn't go.
It wouldn't
go further.
fit.
No.
Okay.
No, because look, here's the turn lane, it's here, and that's the Roundwood Avenue. Yeah, wouldn't affect off-site, it would have to be extended and incorporate part of our property.
And then that wouldn't change your variances even greater from the 20 feet to?
No, because that's what's there today.
Okay.
And which technically is used as a turning lane now, right? I mean, people basically queue into that already. So what the county has said is they just want us to extend that to Roundwood Avenue.
But they did say we need to verify that it'll fit.
Absolutely.
Okay. And for the life of me, I can't think of what my third question was. But that's all I have for now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, if you think of it,
I will.
we can always come back to you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Storr. Can you tell us why you need a special use permit from the town board?
Automotive use, right, Matt? Automotive use. Any automotive use on this site and car wash falls within a specified category of automotive use. And we've acknowledged that right from the get-go.
Okay.
The other thing I want to acknowledge, because Matt's brought it up again and again, we also acknowledge upon approval that we have to merge the two parcels. And we will do so. There's two current parcels. There's 371 and 3620 Walton.
Yes.
Matt brought up before, I just want to acknowledge for the record that we would have to merge the parcels.
Okay. The sound barrier that is offered, will that have trees on the the side of the accounting office?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for your comment. So the sound barrier is approximately 54 feet long here. There's a 6-foot fence on that side of the sound wall, and then we've added 3 trees here. And again, if we needed to add a couple more, we gladly do that.
Okay, so
you're going to have 6-foot fence, vegetation, sound wall.
Okay, and
all within a pretty tight area, which we really do think will reduce noise.
So, okay, the 6-foot fence is already there on the adjoining property?
No, it's going to be a new fence.
Well, there is one there now, but it's in
terrible.
So
it's a 40-year-old. It'll be a new 6-foot white
solid board on
vinyl.
board. Yeah, solid fence.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, Sean, you said the extension of the turning lane on Central Avenue, did you say 92 feet?
It's 100, let me just make sure I'm using the number, right from your county. 192.32 feet.
Okay, so I'm guessing that my first concern when you brought this to us was the traffic.
Right.
I'm very familiar, although don't live in the area, very familiar with how backed up it can get. And I thought, oh, geez, now we're going to add traffic to it. But, and like John, I've given this particular project an awful lot of thought.
You have.
If you are extending the turn lane by 192 feet, it almost seems to me like it might improve the traffic.
We think it will.
Because you're not going to have like Delta Sonic and Delaware Avenue where people are backed up into the street from the car wash. It sounds like you're not expecting an awful lot of people to try to get in at one time.
No.
So it actually might relieve traffic.
Right. And I think if you think of it, again, the traffic isn't in front of this board in terms of relief, but I do understand the concern. If you think, for example, let's compare a couple uses. That was a medical office for a primary physician group, and John knows as well. It would generate a ton of traffic at the exact time you don't want it, during the AM peak and the PM peak, and a subscription-based standalone car wash simply doesn't do that. But it is going to create
Their
traffic.
busy times are the exact opposite.
Right, and but it is going to generate traffic compared to what's there today, because the site's vacant. We get that.
Yeah.
We owned the gas station across the street, as you know, for many years, and the average transaction count in that gas station every day was 1,200. On the busiest days that this car wash can accommodate, which again would be a Saturday afternoon, they are looking to generate 300 car washes. They have yet to reach that number at Main and Young's. So these are truly low volume car washes. You can see them all over town. I have yet to see one that is queuing out onto a road. They are truly low volume subscription based car washes. And we keep saying subscription based because it took me a while to really understand the way they operate, and that is someone has a free pass, they can go unlimited. So if they're going by at 5 o'clock and it's going to take them longer, they're going to just keep going and they'll go next time they're by.
And that's what you do, right?
It is what I do. So, and at a much busier intersection at Main and Young's. And it is frequent that because I go by there frequently, it is frequent that I pass by because I don't want to deal with the traffic. There's 41,000 cars a day at that intersection versus 35 here. The car wash it's not a destination. It's not going to add traffic to that intersection. It's there, just like the gas station, to draw from the existing traffic.
Okay, well, the site has been vacant for a long time. It's not attractive. I certainly always give great consideration to the concern of the community and people in the area, but something has to go in there. And if not a car wash, it could be something where there aren't all these mitigations offered, the new windows, the fence, the sound barrier, the greenery, et cetera. Yeah, something's got to go in there, and this may be the best option with the extension of the overall picture, although it seems extreme at first glance. The overall picture may be the best that we can ask for. Okay. You had another question, Mr. Storr?
I checked my notes, I got it written down. You kind of touched on it already. What's your average daily? I know your goal is 300, but you've never hit it. How many cars are going in and out a day? 150, 200?
Yeah, what were the vehicle counts? We actually got that data.
Yep, I did provide those.
In January, we talked about it.
They're under 100 on average over the course of a month.
Okay. And
Per day.
Per day. Per day.
Yep, and that's Monday 60, Tuesday 50,
Right.
and then Saturday 230, 240, along something.
On a
more or
on a
less.
car wash day, right?
Yeah, so you'll see, we
we're
talked
coming off
On the sunny day in December, where
after
it's 60,
right.
where
Now you see Delta Sonic sponsoring on the weather on the news, right? Is it a car wash day or not? Which means did it rain or snow the day before, and is it a good day to wash your car based on what's the projection for the next couple days? Yes.
And there's about typically 8 to 10 of those Saturdays a year where you just know this is one of those days people are going to get their car washed.
So it's a fraction. They're looking to draw a fraction of a percent of the traffic off of that intersection on their busiest day.
Okay.
And now that Main and Young's, I didn't think this was going to take 2.5 years. Now we have hard data on a comparable close by intersection to back that up, and we have, and also the multiple other subscription-based car washes in town that are not causing the problems because they have 35 car staffing. I don't see any of them even reach their capacity.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Storr. Anyone else on the board have anything else come up? Okay.
One more point, I'm sorry. The fence on the north side, you have down, is it like 8 feet?
Yes.
Yes.
Two things. Wouldn't that need a variance?
No, I think Matt confirmed it doesn't, right, Matt? That's the right way. We did ask the question because that came up in January that we need to follow up, so it doesn't.
Okay, good. Had you considered putting an 8-foot fence on the east side too, next to the accountant's office? Or I'm not sure he would even want that, or no?
The fence on that side was really for aesthetics. If he wants it, I'd be more than happy to. He did not ask for it.
Okay.
But we would, if that's what it took.
It was really for aesthetics. Yep.
Okay.
And just so you know, we've also made it very clear to the Russos, and of course, they're on the opposite of the right way, that if they associate noise problems with the end of the tunnel, we're going to go back and revisit that. If there's a need for sound paneling, they have
our... If there's a need for sound paneling, if there's a need for lower volume dryers,
they have our...
we make the same commitment.
Okay.
And obviously, it's the noise ordinance. We have to comply with it.
Yep.
And we appreciate they met with us on a cold winter evening at Tim's office in February. So again, the neighbors have been very willing to discuss this, and we do appreciate that.
They've been very accommodating, all things considered. Their concerns have all been legitimate, and we've addressed each and every one of them. And they've been nothing but forthcoming and helpful.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll open it up to questions from the audience. Go ahead, sir, come on up. Give us your name and your address for the record.
My name is John Armstrong. I live at 378 Central.
We're not going to be able
They're
to
going to
hear
want
you,
to hear
sir.
so she can hear for the minute.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. That's okay.
Could you give us your name again?
John Armstrong, 378 Central Avenue.
If you want to sit now, that's okay. She just needed to make sure she could hear you for the...
Well, it
record.
won't be recorded then.
Oh, you won't be able to be recorded?
No,
I'm sorry.
it
I'm
won't
sorry,
be
sir.
there.
You're going to have to go back up.
Can somebody show me where 371 is? On there.
371 Central?
Is that the white house? Yeah, here. It's 377. Well, that's 371 right there. It's just the hat.
Yeah,
So, you know,
Well, it's not on here, but, so right now, here sits the gas station, and here's
Oh, yeah, the existing
Here
house.
is 371 Central's house, right here.
And here's that vacant right away, and then the next house at 377.
Well, I'm at 378, right on the corner of Markey in Central.
Yep.
That corner is a cluster of traffic to begin with. This year, I have security cameras on my house. This year alone, there's been 6 accidents right there in front of where, I'm assuming this is where you're...
It's actually, so this is Remwood, so you're right here.
Yep.
Mark, where your street comes out. Yep.
On the house right next to the one that...
Yep, I know where you are.
Yeah, as well.
Yep.
Okay. Accidents going this way. This way, police pull over in front of 377 a lot for whatever the violations they're picking up for traffic. So anybody trying to make a right out of here to go this way on Central Avenue is going to cause more traffic. When people make a left in front of my house onto Markey, one car is all it takes to back it all the way up to Walden. And even myself, my driveway is on Markey. I cannot make a left out of here without this traffic. I myself have been T-boned at that intersection. So I don't see how anybody could even possibly try to make a right out of here without causing any kind of more cluster of traffic. Even if you were to extend it, bring it out farther, you're still asking to merge right in that same area where there's still continuous accidents.
Yeah, understood. And it's been that way for decades, and I certainly understand that. And we experienced it, because keep in mind, we operated that as a Valero gas station for...
Right. I moved in when it was Unimart.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
We bought it from
Yes.
Unimart,
Yes.
and, right, and trust me, we've waited, right? So our reuse options are reopening it as a gas station.
I understand.
And
I totally understand.
And I honestly...
I get to do something. I get to do something. It is an eyesore to look at that intersection. I totally understand.
Right.
Car wash, I disagree with, my opinion. Again, the traffic, it is going to be worse. I work in industry. As far as sound volumes, yes, I know what a rattling bearing is going to sound like on one of your blowers.
Sir, if you could please address the board and not the applicant.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We don't want this to turn into a...
Okay, no. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't want it to be that way either.
Not
at all.
You're my neighbor.
No, you're not.
As far as sound goes, when you're telling me your blowers have settings, low and high, they're always going to be on high. Everybody's going to want their car dry, so they're always going to be on high, just like somebody would turn their stereo up in their car. It's always going to be on high, and they are loud. I've been to the car wash on Main and Young's. I've stood outside of there. It is loud, as opposed to the traffic in front of my house now. Eyesores, nobody's going to want to buy my house in the future looking out the front window and seeing a car wash. It's my value of my house is going to go down.
Sir, if I could, I can tell you that if Mr. Boyle tells you he's going to be, if the dryers need to be adjusted, if he tells you he's going to do it, he will do it.
Okay.
And we have done it at Main and Young's.
Okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
But again, my biggest concern is the traffic there. It is loud, and the accidents they're getting more and more. A lot of them, more kids are driving there. Again, that intersection of Markey and Central are all rear ends because people stop abruptly to let that one person make a left-hand turn in front of this area where he's proposing for this left turn is going to, again, create more accidents in people's lives. I agree that to put something in there, yes, it's an ugly eyesore, but extending it that far and taking it that far, I mean, I love looking out my front window and seeing that white house that's there. Now I gotta look at a car wash. But again, those are my opinions.
Thank you. Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you. Other members of the audience?
Sure, why not?
Come on up.
My name is William Perovsky. I live at 3627 Walden, directly opposite from where the car wash is going to be. That corner, as you all know, is a nightmare. I cannot ever back out into Walden Avenue. I have to turn around in my front yard. This is going to bring more traffic to this area. And when I go to pull out of my front yard, I have to worry about somebody whooping around the corner from Central on the side of the bank, going 30 miles an hour, somebody making a left turn, which I can't see half the time because traffic is backed up. It is a total nightmare. I just want to make sure that it's taken into consideration how difficult the traffic is on that corner because of visibility. I don't know what's proposed facing the front of my house by the car wash. You talked about sound barriers. Is there going to be a sound barrier in that area? As it is now, as I said, I can't see coming down Central Avenue. And it's like I have to inch out and inch out. And when the winter comes around, they pile the snow up 5 feet by the end of my driveway. It's like I'm lost in a prison. I just want to make sure there's some consideration for visibility, because I would like to be able to get in and out of my driveway. And as the people said, the traffic at Central Avenue is nuts. If you're trying to make a left turn into Walden when the school buses are out, or at 5 o'clock, you're down way past Carrollton Street. You know, in order to get to my house, I had to take the back streets and jig-jag over to Walden Avenue. So it's like, I don't know if the egress from this car wash is going to be just simply going north towards the high school, or it's going to be going both directions, but it's just going to make the traffic that much worse, I think.
Sir, according to the plan that's right next to it, it'll be going both directions on Central.
Okay. Once again, I didn't know any of this until you sent the letter out like a few months ago. And it's the first time you've been sort of proposed what it was going to look like, that's all. And I wanted to say what I wanted to say, because the visibility over there is absolutely horrible. And I'm just afraid that my visibility is going to be even worse, and it's going to be even harder for me to get in and out of my driveway. As it is now, when I pull into my driveway, I have to turn my blinker on Central, because there's half the time there are trucks going through there at 50 miles an hour, and nobody ever stops them. Even though police live in the corner of their property, they pull people over all the time, but it's a nightmare. Just wanted to say what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I just want to acknowledge, we're not here to take exception to what Mr. Armstrong and his neighbors say about existing traffic conditions. They live there. They experience it. All I can say is we're doing the best we can. I do want to note, in response to the second speaker, in terms of sight vision, it's actually going to be pulled back from where the existing building is. Obviously, we know where the bank is on the other corner, which is very close. And in terms of that corridor, it's just a bigger issue than this project. Is it something that probably should be looked at? Yes. Unfortunately, it's not just within the town's jurisdiction, it's DOT in the county. But we don't take exception to their comments.
Not at all. And
we can't.
I think unfortunately, as the town has grown, the traffic volume has grown at that intersection, and the residential has transitioned out, and the commercial has transitioned in. And I fully respect your position, and we've gone through a very long process to engineer out any potential conflicts that we can, including eliminating 4 of our 5 curb cuts.
3 of the 4.
Well, plus the one for the residential. You're right. Yep. But again, to reiterate Sean's point, we absolutely respect your position and acknowledge it.
Yeah, I don't think there's anyone here who's unfamiliar with that intersection, that whole area, and what a nightmare it is. But the fact of the matter is, there's a lot there. It's a commercial lot. It's an eyesore. It's vacant, been vacant for years, an eyesore. Something's going to go in there eventually, which is going to add traffic. So what the board is looking at is what's going to do the least harm. Something could go in there that where the owners are not willing to make the modifications to try to make it better for the neighbors. I don't know what the answer is, but please know that the board does understand your concerns. Yeah. Did you folks want to speak?
Yeah, I'd like to say something.
Please.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off and speak before you.
My name is Charlie Campbell, and I'm here with Kathleen Baltus, and she lives at 3638 Walden Avenue, and she's right next to the tax place. And you talked about the fence being put up there, and the tax people, they don't care if there's a fence there or not. Is there any way that we can have a fence there so she can have a little more?
No, they do. We are putting a fence there.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Next to the tax place?
Yeah, so let me show you, sir, on the plan. So while there's a fence there, I'm going to do this again. We're running a brand new fence, the entire property.
Oh, okay.
6 feet tall.
Right. Because we were under the understanding that you people were buying the tax place and you wanted too much money.
Yeah, well, that was the discussion. Again, we're not saying that we won't have those discussions. We kind of honor that we will, but we've raised the very same concern as Tim indicated. Well, now we have a new neighbor.
It just pushes the same issue to the next homeowner.
Right.
And,
Yeah, you don't want that. We don't.
well, and, you know, right, and we've had many good conversations with Mr. Ring, and he acknowledges, he bought an old house next to a gas station, behind a gas station. He understands that. And he's been very realistic about it.
But I do want to confirm, we have no agreement to purchase that property.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Ask a question.
Please come up, back up to the microphone.
Is there any information about how much lighting is going to be created on the corner? Because there's an extreme amount of lighting in the corner. Is this going to have like all-night signs?
So, you want to answer?
Yeah, so in terms of the site plan review process, and Matt can confirm this, we will have to submit a photometric plan. There'll be no lighting spillover onto adjacent properties. It will be LED lighting, fully shielded, downward adjusted, and we'll need to demonstrate compliance with the town's lighting standards. Most important, that means we can't have spillover onto adjoining uses.
To answer your question, the light cannot spill over onto our adjacent, and we have to do a photometrics plan from an engineer that assures the building department that it will not spill over the lot line, come straight down.
The only reason I brought up is the fact the lights from the gas station are really pretty bad.
Yeah, those are old school lights.
The lighting has come a long way. It's LED directed down now. It used to be, you know, halogen lights that spread out, and yeah. So.
And just so everyone knows, our light fixtures are shown on here. They're facing inward, not outward. So we don't have light fixtures headed out towards the streets.
Most, if not all, site plan reviews will be accompanied with photometric, just to guarantee that we don't have that light spillage or nuisance.
And we will be providing a photometric plan.
Mr. Boyle, would you tell us again what the hours of operation would be? This is open 7 days a week, right?
It is open 7 days a week, and the operation starts at 8 o'clock in the morning and it goes till 8 o'clock at night.
Okay, very good, thank you. Anything else? Okay, anything else from the board?
Okay. One last point, and it virtually is closed on any weather day.
Meaning when it's nice out?
Meaning when it's raining or
right.
snowing.
Right.
Which in Buffalo can be every other day.
Yeah.
It essentially is.
Not right now.
It essentially is closed during those days. Which I think when we look at the overall traffic picture, that's a very, very relevant point.
Yes, I hear you. Those are the days the traffic's going to be backed up the most. Okay, anyone care to make a motion? Okay, I will do it. Can I use this? Thank you. Whereas the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Town of Lancaster has made the following findings: that no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that no detriment to nearby properties will be created by granting the area variance relief sought, that the benefit sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance relief sought, that the requested area variance relief is substantial, that the proposed area variance relief will not have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district, that the alleged difficulty is self-created but not to the extent necessary to preclude the granting of the area variance relief sought, that this board has taken into consideration the benefit to the applicants if the variance relief sought is granted as weighed against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant, that within the intent and purposes of this ordinance, the variance relief sought, if granted, is the minimum variance necessary to afford relief.
I'll second.
Thank you, John. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lorenzo,
Are we voting on all of them or individuals or?
you have to vote on it all together.
No.
Mr. Mike Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Castellano,
No.
Mr. Storr.
Could I ask if we're not going to get a majority vote, given there's only 5 members here, that we table this to a full board before a vote?
Can we do that?
Once the vote has already
Didn't we already start?
Yeah, you can until the vote's occurred. Remember,
Yeah, we're not done voting?
Occurring?
I would defer to your attorney, but
Yeah, well, it's occurring, it's not the final vote until everyone votes, so we still could table it.
I mean, we've been at this for months and months. I think, it's not the board's fault, but I think this warrants a full board decision.
If we can do it, then I have no objection.
Do we need a motion to table it?
Yes, please.
I'll make a motion that we table it.
Second?
Keith?
Yep.
And the only thing I would conclude with, is there any other information we can provide to the board members or specific any other concerns you'd like us to take a look at?
I think you've done it, as I said earlier, I think you've done a great job. And as Mr. Castellano has told you, we really appreciate all the time and effort that you've put into the.
Okay.
All in favor of tabling this?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you and enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Okay.
We'll
Thank
see you
you.
in the future.
All right. Okay. Does the board have any other business? All right, motion to adjourn.
We got, yeah,
Did you say
nothing?
second? And you said,
Yeah.
okay,
You don't
so
don't need to
moved.
tell us anything, talk to anything? There's nothing you can talk to us
Adjourn.
about?
You have a couple minutes to stick around. Thank you.
Application and the reasons that we took the positions that we took, just for further clarity. Not this last, but the second last. And I attempted to remind this board that this project, right from the very get-go, had multiple variances. And because of the potential intensity of use, because these were spec units with residential occupancies, we didn't know what was going in here as is in this case. These were spec units. That whole first floor could have been assembly occupancies loaded with restaurants, coffee shops, whatever. The parking lot was way too small. The building was way too big. And the difference is that this is a car wash. That was a spec building for anything. The same as the pole barns that we see in the general commercials, the multi-family mixed use, the light commercials, these are spec buildings. So anything can come at any time. And this is why, when we look at these projects for what they are, if they're already a dedicated use and occupancy, you get a pretty good handle of what's going to be there, what's not going to be there. These spec buildings, we have to think at the most intense use when we consider these variances. I don't want to tell this board what to do, but this is what I look at when I do plan review. And when that initial letter came in, 1 to 15 employees in a real estate agency, we don't have resources to go knock on people's doors and ask, how many employees do you have? Because there was a car accident here yesterday afternoon. Because there's too much parking on the shoulder of the road, parking across the street, and then walking across the street to get to this facility. That's why I was adamant as I was with this specific project.
I appreciate it, ma'am.
But you were following the code, and we get that, yeah. You were doing the right thing by denying it.
Are we still
You were.
We are still on.
Yeah. No, ma'am, I think I speak for everyone when I say how much we appreciate your input.
Thank you.
And, yeah. you're-
Good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
For what's left of the summer evening.
Okay, before everybody leaves after